delay any further, I will get started now. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. My name is Christine Schmidt, and I'm the Deputy Director and Head of Research at the Wiener Holocaust Library. We are really delighted to welcome you to our second event in our series that amplifies themes of our newest exhibition, Holocaust Letters, which was launched here in London just last week. And I'm especially pleased and honored to be hosting Professor Debórah Dwork for this lecture. The Holocaust Letters exhibition and events are co-organized by the Holocaust and Genocide Research Partnership, or HGRP for short. The HGRP is a collaboration between the Wiener Holocaust Library and the Holocaust Research Institute at Royal Holloway, University of London. And its primary mission is to reframe public engagement, education, and heritage practice about the history and memory of the Holocaust and genocide. Our activities are partly funded by the Ernest Hecht Charitable Foundation, to whom we are extremely grateful. The Holocaust Letters exhibition examines correspondence for evidence of how Jewish persecutees understood what was happening to them as events of the Holocaust unfolded, taking both a history of knowledge approach as well as a consideration of the materiality of the letters. Through letters held in the library's archive and in private collections, the exhibition uncovers how people exchanged information across borders in defiance of censors and in the midst of chaos, deportations, and destruction. We also ask, how did survivors and relatives preserve or come to safeguard letters from the wartime period? And how did these seemingly ordinary objects transform into precious and extraordinary symbols of what was lost? What do their marginalia, markings, and other physical characteristics tell us about the past? Professor Dwork's lecture fits wonderfully within the themes of the exhibition and offers an opportunity for us to consider the content and meaning of Holocaust letters for those who sent and received them. Jewish families in Nazi Europe tried to hold on to each other through letters, but wartime conditions applied. Letters were censored and could not be sent between countries at war with each other. So how to keep in contact? And once contact was established, what to say and about what to remain silent. In her presentation, Professor Dwork will trace how letters became threads, stitching loved ones into each other's constantly changing daily lives. Now, before I introduce our speaker, just a few notes of housekeeping. You will be kept on mute throughout the entire event. And if you have a comment or a question, please enter these into the chat at any time. And after the formal lecture, we will try to answer or address as many of these as possible. I've also switched on auto captioning. And please note that this is automated, so it doesn't always reflect the words of the speaker accurately. You can turn this on and off at the bottom of your screen. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can reach out to me or my colleague Martina directly via the direct message feature in the chat. And finally, this event is being recorded for the libraries and the HGRP's YouTube pages. So if you're logging in late, you can always come back and catch up a bit on at the beginning on YouTube. And I will post more information about this in the chat for anybody who comes in late because of the technical difficulties. So now to our speaker. Professor Debórah Dwork is the director of the Center for the Study of the Holocaust, Genocide, and Crimes Against Humanity at the Graduate Center, City University of New York. She is renowned for her scholarship on Holocaust history and her path-breaking early oral recording of Holocaust survivors, weaving their narratives into the history she writes. Her award-winning books include Flight from the Reich, published by Norton in 2012, Auschwitz, also published by Norton in 2006, Holocaust, published by Norton in 2002, and Children with a Star, published by Yale University Press in 1991. Debórah Dwork is also a recipient of the International Network of Genocide Scholars Lifetime Achievement Award in 2020, and the Annetje Fels Kupferschmidt Award, bestowed by the Dutch Auschwitz Committee in 2022. And full disclosure, Professor Dwork was my Dr. Mutter. She was the founding director of the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, which was, of course, the first program of its kind to offer doctoral studies in Holocaust history, and is thanks to Professor Dwork's vision, energy, and brilliance that so many of us have entered into the field today. So I'm both delighted and very honored to welcome my mentor and my friend tonight, Debórah. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Christine. And of course, I am completely verklempt to be here as a speaker in a series that you are hosting. The exhibition is wonderful. And of course, it is my privilege and my pleasure to be able to speak about my scholarship that resonates with it. Now, you will see on your screens a list of terms. Right. These terms do not have particular historical value. They are simply terms it's simply a list to ensure that you can capture what I am saying as I'm saying it, because if you are like I am, and I hear something that I don't quite capture, I turn to the person next to me, which is impossible when we are meeting virtually, and I say, what did she say? So the list will explain to you what I did say. And it's also a way of following along as I speak. So now I will stop speaking about speaking. I will talk for 40 minutes, plus minus 10%, depending upon how often I breathe. So you can pace yourselves. And I will begin. Some years ago, I was given a collection of over 1,000 letters written by Jewish parents in Greater Germany and children they thought they had sent to safety in France, Belgium, and England. The letters flowed through Elizabeth Lutz, a middle-aged, middle-class Christian lady in neutral Switzerland. To bypass censors' eyes, Lutz painstakingly copied correspondence she received and, keeping the originals, mailed her copies to the intended recipients. Maintaining the cover that she was the Tante, the aunt, she served as a go-between in the tangle of wartime postal restrictions linking loved ones. Every country censored mail, and her system fooled the censors. Most unusually, and solely because the letters went through Tante Elizabeth, both the parents' and the children's letters were saved. This two-sided correspondence opened a window into the dynamic of families rent asunder by their efforts to escape the Nazis. And I wondered what these and other letters reveal. What do parents say to their children? And what did children tell their parents? What concerns remained constant over time? And which shifted? What is said? And what remains unspoken? And what do letters tell us about the ways in which the family remained the bedrock social unit? I will start with a family that emerges from another set of letters. 3 generations of this family found refuge in the Netherlands. Wilhelm and Adele Halberstam, their son Albert, daughter Kette, and her husband Heinrich Hepner, and Kette and Heinrich's 3 children. I'm sure now you see the point of having the list of terms to keep the names straight. Kette, Heinrich, and the 3 children moved on from the Netherlands to Britain. It was the first leg of a journey to Cuba, thanks to visas Kette had bought from a happily corrupt Cuban consular official. Wilhelm and Adele chose not to emigrate. They stayed in Amsterdam with Albert, and thus began their long-distance relationship with their daughter and grandchildren, which depended upon letters. Do not spare us your news, even when it is not 100% happy. We are prepared for that, Wilhelm wrote, days after their departure. We do not know how long it will take letters to travel, and how often they may go, but we seek to remain close to you, to share your life as much as possible. When war began, correspondence between belligerent or occupied nations ceased. Just when friends and kin became ever more concerned about each other's welfare. But the Netherlands was neutral until Germany invaded in May 1940. In his first letter after the Dutch army's surrender, Wilhelm wrote that of all that had transpired, the lack of news from you to us and us to you was for Mucci and me the most heavy to bear. From this point forward, the irregular schedule of and changing route for their letters continued to worry the Halberstams. This problem beset hundreds of thousands of Jews. Recognizing this need, Elisabeth Lutz in neutral Switzerland stepped into the breach. Living on a small inherited income in an attic apartment in Steffa near Zurich, she undertook an extensive postal service from 1939 well into the post-war years. News about the aunt who forwarded letters spread quickly, and Tante Elizabeth gained dozens of nephews and nieces. She soon became a counselor and confidant, although nearly none ever met her. Genteel poor herself, she nevertheless sent writing paper, envelopes, international reply coupons, IRCs, and reply paid postcards to youngsters and parents. Through these, she supported contact against all odds between utterly impoverished children and their families. The importance of information about daily life to separated family members shines bright in all letter collections. Severed apart, neither could follow or fully comprehend the situation of the other, yet they yearned to understand and to be understood. The framework of their lives shifted, and their loved ones knew nothing of the new context and its rules. All of this needed to be communicated letter by letter. The Halberstams sought to build up their mental picture of their daughter and her family's situation. The Hepners had left from Liverpool for Cuba on the Orduña. It was their bad luck to arrive in Havana on May 28, the day after the infamous St. Louis, with its 937 passengers, mostly refugee Jews, denied permission to disembark. The Cuban government applied the same restriction to Orduña passengers who had obtained visas in Berlin. They were not allowed to land. For 6 weeks, the captain tried to unload his passengers in South American ports as he steered the ship to the Pacific through the Panama Canal. The Halberstams, anxious and impotent, followed the journey from their apartment in Amsterdam. Have you landed in Balboa on orders of the shipping line? Or has Panama offered to take you in? Adela asked her daughter. Is the quarantine site just a way station to a permanent sojourn in the city itself? Or must you move on again the moment Cuba or another country offers to let you in? Begging Keta to write at least once a week, Adela reminded her, I really live from letter to letter. Through the good offices of a Chilean diplomat, the Hepners had met aboard the Orduña. They were allowed to disembark in Valparaiso and take up residence. Relieved, Wilhelm wrote, please instruct us untaught Europeans how the seasons compare to ours, and how many hours of the day are light and dark. You are always with us in our thoughts, so we really would like to know. Do you get up early and finish early, or the other way around? What is the main diet? Is the population light or dark? The Halberstams and the Hepners tried to fill in the white spots on their canvas of knowledge. At the same time, fearing loss of contact, separated parents and children wrote repeatedly of their affection for each other. They sought to weave a web of letters to hold each other tightly and to assure each other that, notwithstanding the pressures of their radically changed circumstances, their relationship endured, and each wished to feel reassured. Children pined for their parents, just as parents hungered for their children, as the letters that passed through Tante Elizabeth reveal. Eva and Susie Gutmann were among the youngsters who came to France on a Kindertransport in late 1938. Elizabeth established contact between the girls and their parents in February 1940. Evacuated as the Germans approached some months later, the youngsters were sent to a children's home in the mountains run by the Jewish philanthropic organization Œuvre de Secours aux Enfants, or OSE. Susie promptly wrote a postcard to Elizabeth asking her to tell her parents about the move and to assure them that she was safe. A month later, she wrote asking Elizabeth to tell her parents that I think about them, and this is all in italics, all the time, and I have just one hope, to see them again. Seeking to keep loved ones connected, Tante Elizabeth accrued ever more correspondence. Please pardon us that we write you without having asked permission to do so, 2 boys wrote her. Our names are Adolf and Robert Hess. Adolf is 12 years old and I am 14 years. We live in an OSE home and have been selected for immigration to America. We write to you because we would like to write to our mother and have no other possibility. Please write our mother that she can write us via you. We must ask our mother for permission to travel to America. Faced with the prospect of departure, they had another request. Can you also send us a photo of her? Providing their mother's address in Vienna, their own address, and a photo of themselves, they concluded, thank you so much for sending our letter onward. Please answer us. She did not disappoint, and they were included in that transport to America. Many Jews caught in occupied Europe, as well as those who helped them, resorted to code in correspondence with the outside world. Many more fell silent. A sense that the ever greater dimensions of the tragedy endured by those who remained behind could not or must not be entrusted to paper shadowed each letter. Correspondents struggled with what they should write or say. Communication between refugees abroad and family and friends left behind was burdened by the power of words. and thus a desire not to utter them. Out of consideration for you, I do not allow my pen to overflow with what fills my heart. Why should you become as sad as I am? Adela wrote to her daughter Keta. We're now in July 1940. Her self-censorship marked her first step away from communication, an admission that the changing circumstances in the Netherlands challenged the mutual understanding the Halberstams and their daughter had so painstakingly rebuilt after their separation a year earlier. As the occupation continued, their trust that they could maintain a common reality collapsed. They grew ever more silent about the tightening screws. No mention of the fear the Star Decree generated, not one word about the humiliation they endured. Ultimately, events overwhelmed silence. Fearing the deportation of their parents, children who wrote to Tante Elizabeth did not know what to say or how to express their anguish. Norbert Roth wrote to Elizabeth, now we're in January 1942, from an Ose children's home. He wanted to reach his parents, Richard and Regina Roth, in Bad Freienwalde. Although, as he apologized, he did not have any money to buy IRCs. Elizabeth established a connection. None too soon. His parents were about to be deported, he wrote in April. Would Elizabeth mail his letter immediately? Minutes may prevent the arrival of my letter in time. And he confessed to Elizabeth, I am completely agitated and must control myself in order not to show this to my loved ones. Who knows when or even if I will see them again. Regina and Richard were shipped to the Warsaw Ghetto, where they resumed correspondence with Norbert through Elizabeth. Norbert acknowledged his worries to her, but not to his parents. I recently read a Swiss Jewish newspaper and saw with horror how the people live in Poland. Many thousands starve to death, and many thousands die from typhus. In every family, there are victims. Similarly, his mother spoke only of her yearning for her children and not of the horror she experienced. Her last letter, written on November 1st, 1942, said not a word about the mass deportations to Treblinka that had just assailed the ghetto. I am so unhappy to have received no lines from you lately, she began. I hope you are healthy, which, thank God, I can report about us as well. We have our 21st wedding anniversary this month. The most beautiful present would be a few lines from you. But by then, Norbert had been arrested and deported to the East. Deportation, death. How, all parties wondered, to transmit such information. As 1942 wore on, letters accrued their final and most essential function. They served as a sign of life. No one cared what was said, so long as one received word at all. Mail took longer and longer to travel to and from war-torn Europe until all ordinary services ceased at the end of that year. Red Cross letters of 25 words or less, written on what was called Form 61, became the standard means of communication. Introduced during World War I and developed during the Spanish Civil War, these letters allowed civilians separated by war to exchange information of, and I quote, a strictly personal nature to family members, and again I quote, wherever they may be. One side of the reply paid Form 61 carried the name and address of sender and receiver and a message of 25 words. The recipient wrote a reply on the back. This system grew rapidly during World War II, with 23.5 million such messages passed from one side to the other via Geneva. Restrictions imposed by the belligerent nations limited communication to 14 languages and one form per family per month. The Halberstams turned to the Red Cross system when regular postal connection between German-ruled Europe and neutral Chile ceased in early 1943. They continued to use it after they were deported from Amsterdam to the Dutch transit camp Westerbork. Mail delays grew so long that they continually wondered whether their letters got through at all. Still, they persevered in the hope that ultimately and eventually word would arrive in both directions. The pattern of Adela's messages remained consistent, little discussion of hardship, humiliation, or fear, and always an emphasis on family ties, love, and longing. Since 20 June here, Adela explained in a letter of August 8 that arrived in Chile nearly a year later. That's enough. Received from Albert forwarded letters of October and January. Sign of life from Hélène. Congratulate Klaus and Heinrich. Greetings full of longing. Inevitably in Nazi Europe, inexorably, ineluctably, letters brought news of death. Sometimes, as in Adela's Red Cross letter of October 5, 1943, this message was explicit. Last night, Father passed away unexpectedly due heart attack. Albert here since 4 days, of course, great happiness for me. Inform Fishers, letter follows. Unspeakably sad. More often, it foreshadowed what the recipient knew then or learned later was the fate of 2/3 of Europe's Jews during the Nazi era. Adela's last letter, dated October 31, read, Mother and Albert greet, wishing very best. Mary also here without child. I function as an automaton, no purpose in life, in love and longing. Adela and Albert were deported to Auschwitz on November 16, 1943. They arrived on the 17th and Adela was murdered that day. Albert survived until March 31st, 1944. Tante Elizabeth was well aware that death lured. She helped Hannah Hoot Klopstock, one of the children in an Ose home, correspond with her mother Frida and brother Werner in Germany. When Hannah Hoot did not hear from them for some time, she wrote to Elizabeth expressing her yearning for a sign of life from them. Every day I tell myself, today I will certainly receive a letter from Mutti, and still nothing. I do not know what to think about this silence. Maybe the letters have been lost. I hope so. Hannah Root's fears were well-founded. By the end of 1942, Frida could not imagine a happy ending to the tragedy they lived. She bade farewell to her son Werner, who had been sent to a forced labor camp in Germany, detailed to heavy agricultural work, and wrote to Elizabeth in late December. I foresee nothing good and must hold myself together. Frida thanked her for everything she had done and penned a last request. Please help my child, the only one left to me, Hannah Root, and console her when this heavy fate will touch me also. Frida was deported to Auschwitz 6 weeks later. It fell to Werner to relate the news to Elizabeth and Hannah Root. As you see, I alone must write this letter because, as I just heard, Mutti has not been at home for the past week. Werner followed less than a month later, as Tante Elizabeth soon learned. A postcard she had written to him was returned, with the address crossed out and the words in German, zurück, and French, retour parti. Remarkably, this was not the last sign of life from Werner. Christine, image 1, please. In early August that year, the mailman in Steffa delivered a standard postcard from him written in a, quote, labor camp in Upper Silesia on July 18 and mailed in Berlin. The center was Werner Klopstock, Arbeitslager Jawiczowitz, House 3, Oberschlesien. Tante Elizabeth knew a lot about what was happening in Eastern Europe. She did not know about crematoria and gas chambers, but by 1943, Auschwitz had acquired its reputation as a deadly concentration camp. But even if she had surmised that Arbeitslager Jawiczowitz was a subcamp of Auschwitz, we will never know if the evidence offered by the postcard signaled to her that this was not an ordinary concentration camp. Werner was not an ordinary inmate, and the card, no ordinary card. Christine, the next image, please. Written in block letters, his message ran, Dear Tante Elizabeth and dear Hannah Root, I inform you today that I am healthy and remain here for the future. Sadly, I have no news from you, but I hope you are well. For today, very hearty greetings from Werner. 6 lines, not the usual 10 permitted, and no other postcards followed. What we know now was that the Nazis too recognized the importance of letters. Indeed, they unrolled a special project, the letter program of the Reich Security Main Office, to deploy letters to their benefit. Cards as camouflage. According to Dieter Wetzelzeni's testimony in the Nuremberg trials, this program was one of his boss Eichmann's inventions. He had thought out a special system of postcards and letters whereby he believed he could mislead the public. The Jews brought to Auschwitz or to other extermination camps were forced, prior to being murdered, to write postcards. These postcards, there were always several for each person, were then mailed at long intervals in order to make it appear as though these persons were alive. And thus, letters that seemed a sign of life served as markers of death. But that is not the end of the letters story. It would be a good place to stop this presentation. And indeed, you will notice that I did not include terms after this point, but it would not be quite as historically accurate as I would wish. Letters had another function. In Tante Elizabeth's quest to keep families connected, she updated her address book during the war years. Her correspondence helped her by sending news of the movements, both life-threatening and life-saving, of others. Her role took on a new cast at the end of the war. Surviving parents and children turned to her for help in locating each other. She was the last person to be in contact with all. Heinz Pfeffner had corresponded with his mother through her. Heinz had been included in the 1941 USCOM transport to the United States, where he had moved to Santa Barbara and adopted the name William H. Forster. Dear Mrs. Lutz, he wrote in English on January 12, 1945. Again, I am writing to you to supplement one of my previous letters, which I hope you received all right. It is only the anxiety for the fate of my family, of whom I have lost contact since the middle of 1941, that prompts me to make every effort toward a renewal of contact and an exchange of letters. I am sure that you can understand my plight. Heinz, now William, enclosed a letter to his mother, written in German. Dearest mother, it is so long since I last wrote to you that I have no idea where you are and how you are doing. I read the letters that you wrote to me a few years ago, and my heart is with you. So much time has passed, and as a result, I am unable to write German very well. I must use the typewriter to be sure you can read my writing. I am safe and healthy. My greatest hope is that you are happy and healthy. My worry is that I do not know what has happened in the time I did not hear from you. Oh, Mutti, we will see each other again soon and the whole family will be reunited. I just want to be with you and to show you that I have made great progress since we saw each other the last time. I'm engaged to the most lovely girl in the world, and I would like to bring her to you. All these years have passed by so quickly, and I am older, 19, and the only thing I want is to help you and give back to you the love and care you gave me when I was young. I love you so much, and I am sure that one day I will embrace you again and give you all the kisses I missed out on. Rest assured, dearest mother, my love is with you every day. Please write me how you are and what you do. Many kisses and a million greetings from your loving son, Heinz. Elizabeth's efforts to amass information yielded results. Heinz heard from her some weeks later and answered right away. I hastened to answer your letter, which indeed brought sad tidings to me, that of the death of my beloved mother. The news was terrible, but he took comfort that finally he knew. Now functioning as a tracing service, Elizabeth labored under the burden of grim news. The reunion of Ludwig Lutz Scheucher and his mother was a rare pleasure. Lutz had gone on Kindertransport to France in 1938 and had established contact with his parents, Alexander and Agnes, through Tante Elizabeth. Arrested in 1942, he ended up as a slave worker in a rayon factory in Hirschberg. Liberated in Buchenwald, Lutz was repatriated to France, where he contracted typhus. Alexander and Agnes were deported to Riga ghetto in January 1942. When the ghetto was liquidated, Agnes was separated from her husband, who was sent to Auschwitz. She went from camp to camp until finally was released to the Danish Red Cross and brought to Sweden. She cabled Elizabeth from there, and we're now in May 1945. Request address of Ludwig Scheucher. Warm greetings, Agnes Scheucher. Elizabeth did not know Lutz's whereabouts, she confessed to Agnes, but she would do her best to find him. Lutz had survived and returned to Paris, albeit in poor health. Wonderful news. In the meantime, Agnes, who did not yet know that Lutz had been found, replied to Elizabeth's first letter in despair. Now I am totally alone, my husband gone, totally impoverished. If I am unable to find my son, I will not continue to live. It's simply not worth it. Elizabeth promptly cabled Agnes, and Agnes cabled back, and beyond happy that Ludwig Paris, hoping soon address 1,000 thanks. When he was sufficiently recovered, Lutz traveled to Sweden. You may imagine how great our happiness is finally to be together again. He rejoiced from Stockholm, January 1946. If I could just remain here. My visa is valid for only 2 months. I will attempt to get a residency permit, but I have little hope that I will succeed. Agnes, too, sounded twin notes of elation and long-term anxiety. Finally, the boy is here, and I cannot describe to you the feeling of happiness. Through you, we were able to find each other so quickly, and now I wish that you could have been witness to that happiness. She had left a young boy and was reunited with a young man. She was grateful that they got on well and understood that, and I quote her, it could have been so different. It would not have been a surprise after the difficult years in a concentration camp. Yet she worried about their long-term prospects. I hope that he will be able to remain here. Otherwise, this period of happiness will end. And she worried too how to manage going forward. To begin a new life is very difficult for those of our generation. And indeed, there was no, quote, solution to the problem of knitting back together, resuming family life, just as there was no, quote, solution to the ragged finality of death.
Thank you, Debórah. That was an incredibly rich and wonderful lecture and fit, as I mentioned at the beginning, so well with the themes that we are looking at in the exhibition, from the silences, from the way people tried to formulate what they were experiencing and how they didn't, how they could find the language. So Thank you so much for that lecture. And it was really brilliant. And I think we are already getting a few questions in the chat. So if anybody has questions, we do have a bit more time. And if you've missed the beginning of the lecture because of the link issue, please note that it is recorded so you can catch up. I saw some people coming in late. You can catch up on YouTube, hopefully from tomorrow. Debórah, you have a question.
I do. And what I would like to know about is the ways in which the last part of the lecture, that is the post-war part, we always think that it's over when the war is over, but it's not over. It's just, we're just on to a new set of difficulties. And I wonder how the exhibition deals with that. If you could talk at all about the resonances.
Sure, that was the end of my sentence, which I didn't go into because we talked about this part of your lecture being also a perfect segue into discussing the exhibition. We have examples, of course, of people searching for each other after the war. We have one particularly interesting example of someone who, a Czech survivor who was looking for his family. He was separated from them after being deported to Auschwitz, his wife and 2 children. And then as he made his way back to Prague after being in several camps and being liberated, he thought that they had all perished. He thought that they had all died. And then it turned out that he heard a rumor that he saw someone saw his daughter on a Soviet news newsreel before a film. And so the letters, his son, Vic Eckstein, who contributed to the exhibition, talks about how the letters then, sort of sequence his search for Jana, his daughter, for several years. And his name was Arnost Eckstein, and Arnost searched for her until he died. And after he migrated he eventually left Europe for England, continental Europe for England, and then continued his search even after he remarried and started anew. And then now his son has taken up the search. So the exhibition definitely picks up on this theme and talks about how in the process of, that search and writing to facilitate that search, more information is gathered in the corpus of the letters as well. So you can see people telling other people about what happened to them, the kind of practicalities of the search, making sense of rumors. So that really resonated as well, that last part of your lecture. I can see lots of questions coming in. I was going to ask you a quick question about, and this is another aspect of the exhibition, about how letters survived. So I wondered if you could say just a few words about Tante Elizabeth. I mean, she clearly understood the significance of these letters and they were saved. So I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how the letters managed to come to light now. Now obviously you've analyzed them, it would just be interesting to hear about this collection and how she came to save them and where did they go after the war.
So what I've understood is that what I know is that she copied every letter. What I gather is that she kept all the originals with the idea that somebody may come to ask for them or somebody might want to see them. So she kept them because she didn't want to throw them away, which is, I think, perfectly understandable. And she stored them in a suitcase. She was never married. She had no children. She did have a niece and nephew. And when she died, they were the ones who were responsible for cleaning out her apartment. And the nephew found this suitcase filled with letters. I never met the nephew. The nephew never met me, but he knew that I had written Children with a Star. And so he wrote and said, I just found this suitcase full of letters in my aunt's apartment. Would you be interested in them? by any chance? To which, of course, I wrote back, is Paris a city? Of course, I would be interested in these letters. And so he sent, this is in the days when we trusted the postal system. It's amazing. He sent packages of letters, not all at one time. And so I got package 1, package 2, and in this way, 1,000 letters crossed the Atlantic and came to me.
It's really incredible. Yes, exactly. When to think about, us trusting the post back then to send this, and it's remarkable that she saved them. And this is obviously, an archive's dream. Please don't throw things away. Bring them to light and show us. And also this aspect of finding letters, sometimes in the course after somebody's death. This, starting with the trunk. So we actually do have a trunk in our exhibition to kind of as a nod to that. So many stories of discovery start this way. The trunk in the back of the closet. And they did her niece and nephew know about her role. And somebody's asked if she has been honored as righteous among the nations, and that's actually a question that I had as well. Kate asked that question.
So I have 2 things to say. They knew vaguely. And the other person who knew vaguely was the letter carrier. He said, this Mrs. Lutz, she wrote a lot of letters. And he delivered them. And the answer is no, she has not been honored by the righteous among the nations, because as you know, the single most important criterion for that honor is to have risked one's life. And she was in neutral Switzerland. She was always in neutral Switzerland. So her life was never at risk. She did wonderful things, but she was never at risk. Interestingly, and I do not understand this, I tell it, but I have no explanation for it. She was honored by the East German government. And when there was in East Germany, there was a school named after her. So the honor that she has been accorded in public life came from communist East Germany.
That's really interesting too. Okay, so I'm going to turn to a few more of the questions if you have a few more minutes.
Sure.
Dan is asking, Debórah, can you say more about the RSHA's letter program? Was one of its aims to see where letters were sent and thus to identify Jews who had not already come under the Nazis' purview? Or would that have been beyond the resources of the RSHA and postal services in access or occupied countries?
To my knowledge, the RSHA was solely a camouflage initiative. It was instituted. It was organized. It was instituted and organized only when the Germans began to lose the war, and slightly more pointed questions were asked about what happened to these Jews who've been deported, taken away, who left on these trains. We don't hear from them anymore. So I had this great idea. Okay, we'll just, in a way, fabricate or manufacture evidence that they are alive. And it's not 100% fabrication because they actually wrote those letters, but typically the Jews who wrote them were murdered by the time recipients got them. So it was not an espionage program to spy out Jews who had not yet been trapped. It was a camouflage program to stop unwanted questions.
Thank you. And there's a question from Ashling about she was wondering if you could mention anything about the age range of the letter writers. This might have been because, at the beginning you did mention this, but maybe again it was at the beginning, and maybe Ashley came in late. If you could say anything about the
Yes.
age range of the letters.
The age range of the letter writers. The age range of the letter writers were the parents who thought that they were sending their children to safety by sending them to France, Belgium, the Netherlands, England. Some of them, most of them through the Kinder Transport Initiative, but a number who went because the families had connections in those countries and they were sent independently. So the parents were writing. They are of a completely different generation than the children, and the children were writing. So parents were writing to children and children were writing to the parents. Now the children who were writing to the parents who's the youngest in this group? And the youngest in this group seemed to be about 7, 8 years old. They could write. They knew how to write. The bulk of the children are, I would say, from about 12 to 17. However, the letters go on into the post-war years. They go into the 60s. So somebody who was, say, 15 in 1940 was in her 40s still writing to Tante Elizabeth because that was the last connection to her family. Tante Elizabeth was the last connection to her family. So they did not give up. They did not give, the now adult children did not give up the contact. Not every single one, but many kept in contact. And sometimes fell silent, and then I'll stop talking. Sometimes fell silent for 10 years, 12 years, and then picked up contact again. Good thing the woman never moved.
Right. I mean, and it's so interesting to think about, looking at the changes in their lives over time. And I think it's actually, I think it was maybe in Shirley Gilbert's most recent article where she talks about that sort of that forced migration, having a sense of what they had left behind and what they're living now, and trying to have a connection both to locations, both realities at the same time, in a single letter. So it sounds like with these, you're able to really see that over time with some of the correspondence.
Oh, yes. And it's not necessarily a happy story.
Right.
So maybe that's a place to stop.
Yes, I think so. Thank you so much, Debórah. That was a really brilliant lecture. I feel like we could keep talking about these letters. They sound extremely rich. And I just wanted to thank you for lecturing and for bringing these letters to us. If only we could have included them in the exhibition. We couldn't, obviously we can't, but I just think they resonate so well with what we have discussed in the exhibition as well. So it's also really good for people who can't necessarily come to London to think about the themes through your work as well. So thank you to everybody.
My great pleasure. The honor is mine.
And thank you to everybody who's come, and also thank you for your patience with the technical difficulties at the beginning. So thank you again, Debórah. And there's a lot of, I don't know if you can see the chat now, there's a lot of nice comments. And just a quick note to Hillary Kern, who says that she's sitting with an old leather wallet of correspondence. I will be in touch with you very soon. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. And there's one last note from Vivian. Thank you. Good night, everybody.